Hello, happy birthdays to the Sagittariuses. We just started their birthday month, but what if I told you the next week it has nothing to do with that really? It had to do with more of a scorpionic tone with a little bit of Sagittarius in there, and that's what I'm going to talk about here next week. I'm going to jump right in here. Let's put in this here. You know, as I make this video on November 22nd, it's a Saturday on the west coast of the United States. We have our pal Mercury, who we can never forget, who's doing all the work for us, showing us the things for us to review and revise during a Mercury retrograde that started in Sagittarius but has gone back into Scorpio. We had a new moon in Scorpio last week that was pretty big time. I did a live stream. You can go check the new moon live stream out about this and how its connection to summing up many past stories or review, whether it's in the Pisces part of your chart, the Cancer part of your chart, the Scorpio part of your chart, even the Taurus part of your chart. In a bigger scale, I talked about on the live stream about a 29-degree Neptune and Pisces placement that is summing up 14 years. We're almost done with this one, and how I thought the new moon in Scorpio and Mercury in Scorpio were helping out with this review, this internal emotional review. So here we are on the Saturday as I'm making the video, and I want to point out Mercury and its trine to Jupiter and its trine to Saturn, and here we go with another chapter in the Grand Water Trine story where we deal with our past, our memories, where we come from, and what we choose to close up story line in there, and what we choose to bring forward eventually into next year is a lot of the work that we're doing going from the Scorpio, Cancer, and Pisces parts of our chart. So here we are with Mercury connecting with Saturn, Saturn giving Mercury some form. They're working together here. The pinpointed emotional tunnel vision focus of Mercury and Scorpio has its need to probe and to go deep and use its magnifying glass to dial in and to bring that power and energy to the Pisces part of your chart, to the Jupiter part of your chart in Cancer. There, Saturn and Mercury give form. Jupiter elevates all of this. We have the combination of a vision of where we come from and where we want to go, and we start to solidify it and make this internal emotional plan to move forward next year. But first, we got to look at the past, and that's what a lot of us are doing in these charts. And I even see it outwardly when we're dealing with community and culture and country and the debates that are going on with this, and looking to the past and having to mostly move through those things, or those who choose to do something like that, and there's those who will suppress it. Mercury and Scorpio will not tell you, and it's hiding in the background doing its investigative work. And here on the Saturday at 10:45 a.m., Mercury trine Saturn for the second time. It did this several weeks ago, and this is the second time on October 25th. I'm going to point out on December 6th and December 7th, Mercury will do this again with Jupiter and Saturn. We are in the middle of a powerful story here. It's also at 3:37 a.m. officially that Mercury trines Jupiter in Cancer. Again, we can go back to October 24th and October 25th when Mercury and Scorpio did this already, and it's going to do it again December 6th and December 7th. We're at the midpoint of this story. Let's keep moving along, because I'm in that moving along kind of mood. I'm going to go all the way to something that's brewing here that's exact on the 24th, and it has to do with the Sagittarius part of this forecast, and it has to do with Mars here at 14 degrees Sagittarius, a fire mutable sign that will be squaring the North Node in Pisces and the South Node. And here we have a T-square, and this is, to me, the most volatile part of the week, and I think you cannot avoid this even if you're in water trine land. You're going to have to deal with this kind of stuff, and Mars here brings in and sets off stories in the eclipse timeline of this year. That timeline being the eclipses that happen earlier in the year. In Pisces and Virgo, they happen again here in September, and the story gets carried here. And we're kind of at the interesting, I would say, we're not getting to the midpoint of the eclipse story, because we have big eclipses that are going to happen in March here, Virgo Pisces land, But here with Mars here, the aggressiveness, the cuttingness, the need to separate or break free of Mars in Sagittarius, it is squaring these places. If you have been affected by these eclipses, let's say you're a Pisces rising or a Virgo rising, or you have some of these planets hovering around the mid degrees from 13 to 16 degrees, this should be affecting you as I make this video and for the rest of the week. I, in particular, am not the biggest fan of Mars squaring the nodes. They usually set things off in world mundane events, political events. Let us hope that we don't have any more BS, because we have had enough. I've had enough. But stuff like this, with Mars pushing a Sagittarius agenda, I'm not saying Sagittariuses are messed up, but the representative of a pushing something, trying to push out, when a lot of the other planetary aspects here, like Venus and Mercury being in Sag and how they're connecting to water, is more of an internal thing. Mars in Sagittarius is an external thing, and we could see a lot of pontification here this week, or people trying to push some sort of agenda, dogmatic agenda, okay? Those are my personal thoughts on something like this, but this is just based on what I've been seeing with Mars and the nodes over the years. That will happen exactly at 5:32 a.m. on the 24th of November, which is my Monday Pacific time. Let us keep going, because what you see, I'll just keep the chart here and I'm going to highlight with a circle. I'm actually going to use a circle right here, and I will highlight Mercury, and that's another circle. I will highlight Mercury and Venus, which they will do a conjunction here at 5:51 p.m. on the 24th. I talked about this on my new moon live stream. I talked about how important it was for this intimate talk that Mercury and Venus are going to do in Scorpio. Any of you Scorpios out there, even though the Scorpio birthdays are done, unfortunately, I cheer for you. I cheer for you guys. And I also will call you out when you're doing your dumb stuff, okay? So anyway, I really find this interesting here, because these types of conversations that Mercury and Venus will have in Scorpio are in secret. And they need a container to be able to go to harder, challenging, and maybe darker places in conversation that have to deal with a certain type of truth. In some ways it can be manipulative, but in this case, because of the other connections to water, with the Pisces and Saturn and Pisces and Neptune and Jupiter here, and I think some of the influence that Mercury already has a couple days before connecting with Saturn and Jupiter, here comes Venus, right? And so here, I think the intensity, the passionate kind of one-on-one needing to be pinpointed to the truth, that's only able to be done in places that are safe and are of an intimate container, pretty much is part of the week here that's going on. So forget about the world politics and stuff like that and all that kind of thing. Think about more internal, what happens on one-on-one conversations, the secret text, the revealing retrograde, Mercury retrograde revealing bits of information that you've been seeking, let's say in the Scorpio part of your chart, comes to a head here on the 24th. I really like the aspect. It could be some really good pillow talk if you know how to use this the right way. but in general, a very important moment here this week, where we have the conversation we've been needing to have, I think, for a long time, for weeks now. When we first had Mercury go into Scorpio and then eventually go into Sagittarius, where it went retrograde, we thought we heard it all, or we had a feeling, Mercury and Scorpio had a feeling that something wasn't being said, that there was something missing, there were some facts missing, or some emotional content that was being hidden away, or you could see it and feel it in somebody, or they were triggered by something and they didn't even know they were triggered by it, but you saw it, you caught it, you felt it, and you didn't say anything. Good measure, and you're like, I'm going to observe this situation. And I think here this week, some things are said, even though Mercury's not fully stopped and going to move forward, which will be part of this forecast here in a second. But I think it's very important to note this week that there's going to be things that are said in a different kind of way the last couple weeks. And really take notes and really observe here. Do I tell you to take action? I in particular say no. If you don't have to, don't do it. You're going to get your chances here in the next week, 2 weeks after, when Mercury starts to move forward. I just want to point this out one more time. Mercury-Venus conjunction happening in Scorpio. Sort of fueled by Mars, because Mars rules Scorpio, and hence we have the square to the nodes. Again, if you're a type of person that's affected by these signs, you're going to be affected this week if you aren't already. Let's go to the 26th, as I'm going to go through this here. This is a very important, interesting week. On the 26th, there is Venus now. I'm changing the color. I'm going to go purple on this one because of Scorpio. Here's Venus at 25 degrees, and here's Saturn at 25, and there's Jupiter at 24. We pretty much have another hit of a grand water trine that is happening. Let me give you the exact date. So basically, at 8:31 a.m. on the 26th, which is Wednesday Pacific time, we have Venus trine Jupiter, and then later in the day at 3:47 p.m., Venus trine Saturn. We have another grand water trine, but this time it's with Venus. And so Mercury has done a lot of the revealing for you in Scorpio here in this chart. Mercury's already kind of giving you the messages for from the end of October it hit this place, and here it is now. And then Mercury's made that rendezvous with Venus the day before, and they had a conversation, and Mercury's like, listen, this is what's happened to me in the last couple weeks. I just want to give you a heads up. Look for this, watch out for that. Definitely scorpionic energy where you're like watching out for, like, don't even bother to go there, and if you do, wait till later when they are exposed. Don't lose your stuff, or don't lose your emotions over whatever else people are tripping about, or the things that they're doing because they've been triggered for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So Mercury and Venus have an interesting conversation, and Venus starts to move forward and then runs into Saturn and says, hey, Mercury told me about your trine that happened several days later. And the same conversation happens with Jupiter, and on this glorious day, I love this stuff, and I think when Venus and Jupiter get together in a harmonic way, a trine, oh, do we have the deepest of beautifulest, is that a word? Connection that happens between Venus and Jupiter. And let this be a reminder that way back when, in the middle of the year, end of July into August, we had Venus in Cancer, and we had a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer water signs that happened, and that will happen again next June at 25 degrees. So I find it interesting here that this 24, 25 degree mark with Jupiter stationed retrograde here and Venus here in a water sign is kind of taking a story that happened months ago when Venus and Jupiter were together in Cancer. For those who have water placements at 23 to 27 or something like that, this is a big week. And I think here, if you've been affected by the Jupiter and Cancer transit in your chart, like it's been very obvious to you, it's been very, in a sense, you've had to go deep and have it profound with Saturn and Pisces affecting it, but like Jupiter recently staging to go backwards at the 24, 25 degree placement, and you have something there, the story should be obvious right now, but what you need to walk through and understand and process and go through in the Cancer part of your chart, and Venus and Scorpio here is going to help you out, which with some mercurial information that it's carried with its beautiful, sexy rendezvous with Mercury and Scorpio. So saying that, we have, I said Venus professes, Jupiter holds and merges, and comfort, artistic, great social story, but it's really a one-on-one connections here on intimate connections this week. Again, Saturn creates form and boundaries and gives steps and deep discipline to Venus and Scorpio, which I think it likes, into a story happening in the water parts of your chart. By the way, if you're a Pisces out there or a Pisces rising, I'd sure like to hear your stories. I'll put them in the comments here. You're getting done with a 2.5-year Saturn and Pisces story here, coming into the beginning of the year, and a 14-year Neptunian story, and you have eclipses happening to you. So for me, I'm like, and you Virgos too, like the both of you, I sure like to hear your stories. You can leave stuff in the comments. Please do that. You can also hit me up privately. If you're one of these situations where you want to get some insight, I love talking with people one-on-one. I got scorpionic placements in my chart. I love doing this, right? So if you're gonna book a session this week or next couple of weeks, Mercury's in Scorpio, it's a good time to talk to me because I actually flourish in these types of transits, all right? So let us go. I will go then. Speaking of Saturn, when we get to the 27th, I will move this right here. We get to the, I'll take it a day. And is the moon in Pisces yet in this chart? It is. And we see something interesting happens here. We hit pure water land here with the moon coming into Pisces. And then we see this little S on my chart software here. And Saturn, after being retrograde for 4 months, is going to stop. And it's going to stay at 25 for a while here, but it stops. And it's not going backwards anymore. And eventually, slowly, the way Saturn does, will move forward and slowly climb up the mountain to finish its transit in Pisces, and we will hit that area pretty much at the end of January and the beginning of February next year, when it will go into Aries for good for 2.5 years, and it will do it with Neptune. So a week that has to do with a lot of water, speaking through Mercury and Venus and Scorpio, okay? And I'm thinking about making another video for what this means for each sign. Am I promising you and myself this during Mercury retrograde? You know me, who knows? I might surprise you on this. That happens at 7:51 p.m. Pacific on the 27th. And we get into the next day. You can see how the waterness is moving here. The 28th, the moon's still in Pisces. The moon will conjunct the North Node and square thing. And we get to the 29th where we hit another important point, and it's when Mercury stations to go forward, stations and stand still, and we are officially starting to get out of the backwards part of the Mercury retrograde story. We still have a lot to do here after this, but you could see this week that Saturn in Pisces, Mercury in Scorpio will stop by the we get to the end of the week, and they're stationary. So it's very important here that we don't rush things this week, and when we get to the weekend, I know many people are like, oh, Mercury, I've been waiting for this, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's not going backwards anymore. It was horrible, whatever. You got always people saying horrible. Mercury retrogrades were horrible. I, in particular, in some of the stories I've heard, actually, I think this has been a good one compared to the last Mercury retrograde that happened. The stuff that went into Virgo, all that kind of stuff, it wasn't the best. It was a Leo Virgo thing, so I'm not. And that was tied to eclipses and stuff. So for me, I think this has been a good transit and will continue to be a good transit. The reason being is Mercury will eventually touch and trine Saturn and Jupiter again, like I talked about, the 6th and 7th of November. So besides that, we have Mercury stationing, an important moment. In particular, when Mercury stations to go backwards and to go forwards are huge moments in the Mercury retrograde cycle, as in the in-between point when Mercury is conjunct the Sun. Here we are ending at pretty much 3 weeks of retrograde with Mercury and Scorpio here, and that happens on the 29th, but something else happens over here. And this is what makes this next weekend, in a sense, a different type of volatile. I enjoy this volatility. If you don't know this about me, I enjoy it when we know we're talking about it and we're forecasting and we're like, hey, you know, we see it. So we're not going to be surprised. But speaking of surprises, it's also building this whole week that Venus at 28 degrees is going to be opposite Uranus, 28, 29 degrees. That will happen exactly at 6:48 p.m. There will be a Venus-Uranus opposition. And so after Venus pretty much gets down and makes love with Saturn and Pisces and Saturn and Jupiter and Cancer for the grand water trine, and the effects are still there. It's not like it just goes away. We got the moon in Pisces here around this time. You see this, it's trining Venus around this early evening or afternoon for those on the West Coast, for those the next day living in other parts of the world. You see with moon going through the North Node, and then it will go through Saturn, and then to Neptune. So the grand water trine's way into effect here, and Venus does this, but hey, Uranus has a say on the game to do the opposition. And so it gets a little kinky, and it gets a little weird when we hit the weekend, and Mercury will be stationing out of retrograde. I have a feeling that for many of you this week, you'll finally see the truth of some things, and some people might be blindsided, some people might enjoy the spontaneity and the erraticness of Uranus opposite Venus. It will be the last time that Uranus in Taurus will be opposite Venus in Scorpio, and anybody who's got Venus in Scorpio, they've had to deal with this once a year for the last 7.5 years. This will be the last one for these Scorpios out there who had placements at the late degrees of Scorpio, 27 to 29. You had eclipses years ago. You had all this stuff happen to you. And here's a story coming back, right? There's a certain story and narrative that has come back here with Uranus to remind you of a couple things to take care of and to clean it up before you go off into massive adventures. You Scorpio people, I've been talking to you for the last month. Hit me up for a session. I know you're on the verge now. You've had to deal with byproduct the last 3 to 5 years of stuff that's taken a while for you to purge and go deep and shed your skin. Some of you are well on your way to something new, a new world, a new thought pattern, a new life. Some of you are about to hit it, but there's a couple things you have to do. If you're the type of person that's Taurus or Scorpio at 28, 29 degrees, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. You can always hit me up for some advice and reflection. Again, we have a Venus-Uranus opposition. Venus, let me just say one more thing here. I think learned something here for the last time. And when we deal with fixed signs, we have to remember how stubborn they are. And in some ways, we need that kind of fixed focus to get us through things, right? So we don't waver or we don't mutate like the mutable signs and the cardinal signs who start the seasons, they start up, but then can they make it follow through? Well, the fixed signs follow through for us, but at the same time, we get fixated and we get stubborn and rooted in. So Venus and Scorpio here, if you're that type of person in particular, you have this. Here is a moment this week when it's meeting with Mercury retrograde, and then it's meeting with, Jupiter and Saturn and water. We did this. And then to end it with Uranus and Neptune, there's something fundamental on the biggest of pictures for you to take in one more time and to understand. Not just the transformative nature of what Venus and Scorpio does when it is wanting intimacy, it is about obsession, it is about a type of relational truth that it wants to bring into relationships, but Uranus brings a little shocker, brings another little curveball for you to learn about. And at the same time, Neptune, if you could see the bigger picture of this, the bigger picture after 14 years of Neptune being in Pisces, and you Scorpio people at this, I know I'm going off on a tangent here on this thing, but you Scorpios or anybody with water and earth at 28, 29 degrees, this is a fundamental summing up of a big, huge story. And you could sometimes find the connections between the water Pisces to the Taurus parts of your chart, or the Scorpio to the Taurus, or the Scorpio to the Pisces, right? So there's some sort of interplay going on here, and you can look to the part of your charts to see how they're relating to each other in a long-term story. Again, if you want any more insight into stuff like this, you can hit me up, all right? Very important. Am I done? I want to be because I'm hungry and I got things to do. Like work on a December forecast that's coming up and starting to think about the next year of astrology. But one more thing I want to say is to bring up the 30th here, which we will get to. It's a Sunday, and this is very important because officially then, and let me move this to the right direction here because I want you to see how it's going to flow from water. I will pick here, and you will see Venus at the last degrees of Scorpio here at 29 degrees officially make its trine to Neptune. That happens at 12:48 a.m. on 30th of November on the West Coast. And it is at 12:13, 12 hours about later that you will see Venus then eventually go into, and I'll just pick it right here. Well, no, that's December 1st. Oh, are we already in December 1st? This chart. I am. I'm just pressing the button too fast because I'm an anxious Gemini and my brain's popping off. If you don't know that, I'm a Mercury in Gemini. It's Venus will then go into Sagittarius. And then I think we could start to really celebrate, or at least deal with, the Sagittarian birthday story. Mercury will bring up the rear in the next couple weeks and start to move fast here. You can still see here, several days after stopping, it's still at 20 degrees, right? So we're going to be like this for a while. For the week, Mercury's going to slowly do its stuff. Eventually, when it does go into Sagittarius and hits 6 degrees, we are full born going to be in December, and everything starts to move fast. At that point in time, Saturn is no longer retrograde. Mercury will no longer be retrograde. Neptune will not be retrograde. We'll talk about on the next forecast. And December is going to move real fast when we hit the mid part of it. And all of a sudden, we're going to be at 2026. But in these lingering weeks that we're going to catch up, we're looking especially at the past and trying to understand years ago in some of our charts. And for many of us, naturally, at the end of the year, we think about what the hell happened to us in the world. The aspirational view of things and how we enact that externally is coming our way. We get a little bit of hint of it in December, and we'll be fully into this next year. For the meantime, and for this week, don't be afraid to swim deep. Take your time. Time works differently in water sources and water vehicles. And even though Mars in Sagittarius squares the nodes and wants to push something, think about what Mercury in Scorpio and Venus in Scorpio are doing. They're moving at the pace where not only do they feel safe, but where they are most powerful. And when they connect with Jupiter and Saturn, you're getting some unbeatable aspects. And to have Venus at the end of the week with Neptune and Uranus, you're embedding something in that Venetian story that's for later on. And in the end, you hear all the key words, all the whatever words. I don't care what words you choose to use. I'll use transformational. I'll use regeneration when it comes to Scorpio. I'll use power and obsession and a type of survivability that like no other sign has, what Scorpio can go through and understand. And the key thing to understand is knowing when to let go. It's knowing when to focus when we deal with transformational stories, and when we get to a point where we know that something in the past that elevated us, gave us power and got us through, and we realize that that doesn't work anymore. Do we hold on to it, or do we let it go? And that, when you let it go, is the ultimate scorpionic underworld move. To shed your skin, even let go of the stuff that worked in the past. That is my little insight for you for this week. Hit me up if you need to. You can get a reading with me. You're new here, subscribe. I do videos outside. I do live streams. I got extra interviews coming up for my Patreon and YouTube members. Whatever you want to do it focused this week. Stay in your heart. And treat yourself something sweet. That has nothing to do with astrology. That actually just has to do with me going, I think I'm craving something sweet. On that note, I'll see you on the next video.